If you're new to building lutes, one of the most frightening things is taking your new lute body off of its mold. You've just put a lot of work into carefully shaping and fitting all of these ribs into a body, but now you have to pry them free from their supporting structure, and it's an opportunity for things to quite literally explode if you put too much force in the wrong place, or if things aren't as strong as they're supposed to be. So here is the method that I've arrived at to safely and reliably get my bodies off of their molds with as little damage to both the instrument and the mold as possible. First, I covered the seams at the end of the lute with veneer tape. This is a shrinking paper and mucilage tape that when applied over the joint as it dries, it closes together and makes it even tighter. These should already be closed good joints, but this provides a layer of reinforcement that keeps them from being able to move independently and pop ends out. This can be a really common problem when you're taking an instrument off the mold. You get a lot of force as you're trying to lift this end. It's really easy to be glued to this solid portion of the mold, and the veneer tape, applied wet and allowed to fully dry, will help hold these together so that individual rib ends don't come free on their own. The next step is to mark all around the inside of the body with a knife or a sharp pencil. Double check to be sure that your line runs evenly with the bottom of the mold and doesn't have anywhere that it dips below or comes up above. This doesn't have to be the single most perfect line you've ever created, but it is the basis for the front plane of the instrument going forward, and the closer that line is to being correct, the easier it will be to have your instrument turn out without a nasty twist in the body. Once your line is marked, we can begin separating it from the mold. Freeing the instrument body from the mold requires breaking a lot of points of glue contact. Now, if you've waxed your mold and coated it with a non-stick finish, this glue will break away relatively easily, but there's aggregate strength in all the hundreds of points that there will inevitably be glue between the rib joint and the point of the mold that it sits over. As you build the instrument, I highly recommend, after the glue has dried on each rib, doing this process where you insert a palette knife between the rib and the form and bring it along and find the points, and then carefully break the glue where it adheres to the joint. This is sometimes easier in the other direction, depending on how the glue laid and the way the spacer is fitting. But the primary thing is breaking these gently one at a time with a thin palette knife is less likely to damage the overall structure than doing it all at once as a solid unit that's getting pulled and deformed by all those points. So after each rib goes on, there's a sweet spot where the glue is still soft enough that it will cut fairly easily, but strong enough to hold the joint. If you don't think you can identify that point, if you haven't found that, it's better to err on the side of more dry. You can always shatter the dry glue without breaking the joint, unless the joint is very bad. But if the glue is a little too soft still and you go to do this, it's really easy to break it apart at the tight corners. The tail end of the instrument takes the most care and caution as you break the glue bond. There are tight bends, there tends to be a lot of glue, and a relatively weak connection at the points of all these ribs. Work the tip of the knife. your most flexible palette knife so it can follow the curve along and through. This one's coming away fairly well. Sometimes it snaps and crackles more until you've come all the way around. When I am building the instrument, I do this glue cutting process to just past the tight curve, and I leave this area where any glue holding it to the mold is just an added benefit. But now I trust that this whole instrument is free from the points of the mold, and we can work on the neck block. As you can see, on larger bodied lutes, I use screws to attach the neck block. If you used screws, back them out. If you didn't use screws, as I do on smaller instruments than this G lute, and you've instead tacked the block with glue, you can try to insert a knife to break that joint, or you can just rely on shearing force to break that glue bond, and as long as you didn't use too much glue, that'll do it. To free this from the mold, we're going to rely on one of the properties of hide glue that makes it so useful to us. It's very strong under gradual strain, but it tends to shatter under a percussive force and very sharp loading. So we can use a hammer and a block to protect the surface of the neck block in order to gently shatter any glue bonds around this neck block that are still holding it to the mold. Just a couple short taps should do it. You can hear how the sound changed, or at least I can. You should be able to in yours when it comes free from the mold. Now, when we lift this away, there are a couple things to keep in mind. This is tight to the mold all around, which means if we tilt it too much in one direction, we can create stress, we can be bending it, and because this is a completed hemisphere, that can put a lot of stress, that can concentrate stress in weird places, and we can shatter our instrument, in particular around the tight end. If we are lifting the neck block end too quickly, we want to try to lift this evenly. But what you're going to do is just hold the mold underneath, kind of the palm on that neck block, and just gently push. There we go. And then lift off your body. You'll probably have some little bits of the mold. That's normal. You'll clean those up. And so there you have it. A quick, easy way to make sure that all your hard work comes free of the mold in one single piece. I hope this is helpful to you in your lute making journey. Thanks for watching.